We're talking about the presidency of Reagan and social concerns of the 70s and 80s. Now, this is the final slide, the final section of this chapter, as far as domestic issues from 1945 to the 1980s. After this chapter, the final portion of domestic issues that we will cover for the AP test will cover the two President Bushes, Clinton, and then briefly with President Obama. One thing you need to understand with President Obama, he's very new. We don't have a lot of history written on him as a whole, thus it won't appear in great wealth on the test. Okay? Ultimately speaking, this entire section, this entire chapter that we've been covering, maybe 10 questions on the whole AP exam. Okay? So the highest potential information you may be tested on that I'm covering this for is an essay. There's usually always one essay from the 1960s to the 1980s. It's either going to be on Vietnam and Korea or the Civil Rights Movement, which is why we even cover these two chapters. Okay? It'd be a disservice if I didn't do that for you. That being said, all right, hold on, flipping out. Okay, that being said, not since Hoover had an ambiguously conservative president. You have to understand, this is the hero to the conservative portion of America. He's the guy we've been looking for. Now, recently, Mitt Romney, obviously, had been compared certain conservative policies to Reagan. Okay, that being said, that's trying to rally support of that more gilded age that would remember the effectiveness of Reagan as a president. Now, we're going to analyze that today. So you have to understand that some people were very, very on board just because he's overly conservative, whereas others were very hesitant for that very same reason. A few icons of his presidency. Several conservative justices appointed, specifically Sandra Day O'Connor, the very first female Supreme Court justice. That's a highlight. Okay? Make sure you guys head that on. That is a big one right there. He appoints, I believe, 3 of them. Yep, 3 appointees to the Supreme Court, all very conservative, one of which is a female. Okay, now that's world history. That's your first female Supreme Court justice. Reagan's appointments shifted away the balance from a more progressive to a decidedly conservative Supreme Court, as evidenced in limitations placed on abortion rights and affirmative action. Make sure you have that. What will define this Supreme Court? Those 2 major ideas right there. Abortion, Roe v. Wade, which we'll talk about, and affirmative action. Now, some of you, as you're looking to college, believe affirmative action is still a significant issue. Okay? You have to analyze that and consider the backgrounds that everyone possesses as they're walking towards college, and then reiterate that issue and decide for yourself. Reagan's administration associated with deep cuts in government spending, so cuts in spending and business deregulation, to include a freeze placed on the number of workers in the federal government. Now, a lot of people have issues with what senators, representatives, and members of the federal system as a whole receive throughout their entire life, even after they retire. He, however, is freezing all hiring. He's not cutting positions per se, he's just not expanding at all. Okay, that is the most important initiative issue that he's going to take. Tax cuts for citizens and corporations. Now, that being said here, once the pen comes up, tax cuts, citizens and corporations. What percentage of citizens are we looking at here on the economic spectrum? What do you guys think? Middle class getting tax cuts?
No, the higher class.
The top 10%. So write that down.
What, they pay like 90% of taxes?
Yeah. Okay, so basically we're looking at $250K or higher as far as your household annual income. Now, if you are in that position now, excellent. Many of us in the room are not. I am certainly not, so I can't fathom what that would be like. So these cuts would not personally affect me. Okay, government funding to social programs such as student education loans could be something in your near future. Mass transit, so subways, rail lines, stuff like that, significantly reduced. Okay, meaning interest rates on these loans are going to soar. Many people will not be able to go to college. Okay, but the mindset of this portion of society is that, you know, to the victor goes the spoils. If you have put in the hard work all your life and you can afford to go to college, by all means, write that check. If you cannot, you know, maybe you need to take steps. Maybe you need to join the military, get that GI Bill to help you out. Or maybe college just isn't in your future. All right? Welfare regulated programs such as food stamps, budget cuts. Okay? Other items, now this is a big one I want you to have. Medicare not touched. Not touched. You aid the needy, you care for the elderly. So we're looking at the elderly here. However, Social Security age is raised. So you can't retire yet. We're not going to touch Medicare, but you can't retire initially. You've got to work a little bit longer. That's the mindset that those costs are going to offset. Attempt to reorganize federal government, trying to eliminate these entire departments here. Cutting thousands of jobs. Okay? on the federal and really the state level as well. Restrictions on mergers and takeovers removed. Why? Looking at the corporate level, why would a president remove restrictions on corporate mergers and takeovers? What do you guys think? Thinking big business here.
So that the businesses wouldn't go bankrupt?
So the businesses wouldn't go bankrupt and they're allowed to expand. Okay, so you can almost view that he's supporting a monopoly-based structure.
It's like GM.
Yeah, GM taking all the smaller companies over and forming just General Motors as a whole to include, Chevrolet and all of the others within it, absolutely. Or Chrysler, like how they work with Fiat in North America, although it's still technically an Italian motor company, and Jeep as well. Okay, environmental protection standards that businesses contended driving up costs also eased. Okay, pro-business, not pro-environment. All right, the idea here is to represent corporate America. Restrictions on saving and loan industry reduced. Why? What's the mindset there? Why would you help the banks out by alleviating, X amount of loans that they can offer? What do you guys think?
Something like the depression can't happen again. Like, don't give out money that they don't have.
But remember, the restrictions were imposed because of the depression. We're going back to pre-depressionary mindset here.
Okay.
To try to jumpstart the economy, to make loans more readily available for all of you to start your own business, to get a house. Okay, we're relinquishing these restrictions so you all have greater opportunity. However, these restrictions were imposed to ward off from a Great Depression. Because that was one of the problems as far as how that started. We started issuing bad loans. Okay, so the question there is, will that occur? We're not sure. Okay. Government spending increased the federal government's depositor insurance from $20,000 to $100K. If you ever look at banking commercials or you go into a bank where it says, remember FDIC, that's what we're talking about. Now, why would one increase from $20,000 to $100,000 of federal deposit insurance?
So that more people will put money into the bank?
More faith and trust in your banks, absolutely, because banks can issue out loans based on the amount of funding they have backing. Guaranteed money, absolutely. So previously you had to stop yourself at $20,000. Anything over that, if the bank goes under, we can only honestly promise you back $20,000. Now we can go all the way to $100,000.
Is that now like 250? Maybe it's.
Yeah, it's $250,000. Very good. That's what I was going to write down here. Now we're looking at $250K. Okay. The whole mindset is for you to bestow trust in our banking system. If you can't trust it and you hoard it in a safe in your house, banks can't authorize loans off that. And then the economy starts to slow down again. Okay, look at the housing market crash. How that devastated the economy. People losing their houses, going bankrupt, multiple families moving into one house as everyone loses everything. Those are all taxes we can no longer claim. We need to make the environment hospitable for you all to have a mortgage or a business loan and pay on it. Does that make sense? Well, if you're not trusting in the banks, we can't give out as many loans, so we have to hike interest rates up. Okay? For example, maybe some of your families were refinancing recently. Has anyone done that? You know that people have done that? Because when they got their mortgage initially, say they received it at 5.5% APR, but now it's some places are below 3. Over the 30-year mortgage, that could save you $35,000, even $45,000, depending on how much you have out. It's brilliant. Absolutely, especially if you're at the front end of your loan. Unfortunately, we're going to go ahead and bail out the banking industry as well. Now, this is the first major bailout that we have in American history. Write that down. First major banking bailout. Okay? This is big because you recently lived through one. And a lot of people are saying it's not our fault the banks are going under and issuing bad loans. Why did the U.S. taxpayers have to pay for that? Here's a $200 billion bailout. So this has happened in the past, where the government makes conditions favorable for the banks do not act appropriately, taxpayers bail out the banks. Okay? That's why a lot of people lose faith in the banks. They're going to make bad decisions on the corporate level, and then eventually I'm going to have to pay for it in my taxes? Not many people support that. Social concerns. Okay? So a few statistics that I want you to have and underline. Early 1980s, Asian Americans, nation's fastest growing immigrant sector, ethnic minority. Okay? Fastest growing. Illegal immigration as high as 12 million in the 70s. Okay? Latino Americans begin to hold political office. Huge success. So I'm going to do a little arrow system here. Success. Fail. Success. Okay? Now, why is this first bullet point, though, an important icon? What do you think?
We're finally starting to accept the Asians after World War II.
After World War II, Vietnam, and Korea. Okay? Look at that date. The 1980s is huge because of, I'll write them in, WW2, V, and K. Okay? Those are huge numbers because beforehand there's quite a lot of distrust in that group of people. You know, look at the reaction as far as Japanese internment camps after Pearl Harbor. Those people return, specifically in San Francisco, lose everything, and basically the American citizenship just turned a cheek. Didn't care. Okay? Now we have conditions that are favorable for those people to come over in significant numbers. Native Americans, we have a militant nationalist group with AIM. Write that down. Militant nationalist. The whole idea here is Indian Native American nationalism. Take pride in whom you are and make the government recognize it. Okay? Seized property to generate awareness. Occupying government lands to say, hey, we exist. We've existed here for longer than you have. Okay? We are still subjugated to conditions that are below what they would believe almost humane levels. Take heed to who we are. Right? Don't just forget about us. Silent Spring, use of insecticides on plant and animal life. Many people, there's a nickname going around now, they're called clean eaters. People who only purchase organic stuff. Maybe you know someone, maybe you are one, and that's great. Like to the extent where they will only purchase, fruits and vegetables that have never been treated by insecticides. Because they believe that it could, result in some kind of a genetic issue or birth defect problems in their future children. Okay, and there is some data that supports that, and there's data that doesn't support that. Okay, but this is the rise that we have here. One thing you may see on your AP exam, the use of literature. So Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, devoted at this issue. Okay, so it's a national problem, and it's also impacting literature. For example, labor reform. What would be a great one to include in there? If you're looking for some component of American literature on labor reform and harsh working conditions. What's that again? The Jungle, absolutely. Upton Sinclair. That's an example where you're taking an issue and you can say, here's how it's also affecting mainstream society. And that's where those points get higher on your essays. Okay? Industrial disasters, 3 Mile Island. Like I said, we're going to show this video in here in a second. You have to understand, we're talking several square miles of the U.S. Eastern Seaboard that would be inhabitable if this was to fully melt down. Okay? You can compare slightly to Chernobyl as far as what could have happened, and then just think, whomever you believe, higher power, whatever, yourself, I don't care, that it did not happen. Okay? That's a big one. The EPA, maybe you've heard of them, especially if you're in Earth Club. Yeah. Inspired by crises such as this. Another one that you'll see in Chapter 20, ExxonMobil. Yeah. Okay? The ship that will capsize and start leaking off the coast of Alaska and just destroy and kill thousands of animals. But at the same time, you all drive a vehicle to work, yes? You all drive a vehicle to school, yes? Mm-hmm. We rely on that petroleum. But there are ways that we can ensure that issues such as that never occur again. Or the oil derrick in the Gulf that just wiped out the Gulf coastline with Alabama. Okay, BP. Had a giant mess on their hands with that one. And now you can see on TV, you're starting to see commercials advertising, hey, come to the Gulf, come to Florida. Okay, it's back. Women sought constitutional amendment, equal rights, to address gender abuses and discrimination in the workplace. Did it happen?
No.
Not at all. Does this still exist?
Yes.
Yeah. Some people absolutely argue that. Okay? For example, some people will go to the extent that, looking at like elementary teachers, for example. What percentage of elementary teachers are male?
Not many.
Significantly low. Because some components of administration, say you're an elementary principal, views that male teachers cannot socially teach children of that age better than a female just because of that maternal component. Right? There's that motherly aspect that comes when you hire a female teacher, especially at that age level. Well, that's sexist, but for men. But then you look at the corporate structure. How many females are CEOs of companies?
Very small.
Not many. Okay? For example, look at the show Shark Tank. Talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
How many of those people on there are female?
One.
Only ever one. And if you notice, the two women are never on the same episode at the same time.
Yes.
Okay? It's the same four guys for the most part, and then the two women vary. All right? But if they had all men there, you ask, well, that's kind of sexist. I'm sure there's a female out there somewhere that does something significant financially. In real estate is the one, and then the other is the Home Shopping Network, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay? But nonetheless, this is an issue that we're not talking about just because of the pure controversial nature and heated opinions that arise with it. Roe v. Wade. Okay? This decision, all right, and the big thing here is first trimester of a woman's pregnancy. So make sure you have that down. Highlight that one. It's not total carrying to term. It's within the first trimester only. So you enter the second trimester, abortion not allowed. All right? Now, regardless of your opinions on this, just the facts about this. As women would go to these clinics to receive an abortion, they would be intimidated, spit on, have slurs said to them, blah, 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 really bad things, almost treated as African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, okay, in the South specifically. You also have to understand, we're talking the same intensity as far as these buildings themselves being attacked. Several doctors will be murdered because with their Hippocratic oath, they have a patient who needs assistance and they help them, regardless of moral and religious implications to themselves. They issued that treatment, and some of which will be dead, or will die for that, will be maimed for that. Their family, some of them will outright move to an entire different portion of the country because they can't handle it. Okay? But nonetheless, like I said, we all have opinions on this. Opinions are great, but we keep them to ourselves. That being said, final slide of the chapter. Reagan Revolution. Economically speaking, we've bailed out the banks. We're trying to address unemployment and inflation. So we're going to go ahead and create a title here that many people are going to use all the time, hence Time Magazine, Reaganomics. Okay? Now the mindset here is that you're going to go ahead and do, where are here, significant tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations with the mindset. Now, if this occurs, this is absolutely applicable. But if it does not occur, this is a giant economic fail. The mindset here is, say we all make billions of dollars as a salary. If you cut our taxes, that frees up, at that level, millions of dollars in taxes that we can then reinvest. Okay, that's the whole purpose here. The wealthy elite and corporations are to reinvest those funds into the economy, into expanding their business, into investment on the stock market, which is the same theory of expanding businesses, to employ that bottom sector, the middle class and lower. If they do not, the wealthy simply gain more money, and those tax cuts are ultimately affecting the middle and lower classes. Does that make sense? Which is what will occur. Okay? On paper, it looks like this is absolutely going to make sense. But the reinvestment doesn't occur in great amounts as planned by the executive office. Okay? Also, I want to focus on labor relations. First president to become president after being a union president. So make sure you highlight that. Previously a union president, okay, of the Screen Actors Guild. Maybe you've heard of the SAG Awards. If you're into award shows, like the Grammys and whatnot, the Screen Actors Guild. Anyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Award shows. This is that union, a union representing actors and actresses in both theater and mainstream media. He was the president of. Now here's an example of his relationship with unions as the president of the country. We're going to go ahead and just abolish this. Okay, you strike, you refuse to go to work, your union's dissolved, we replace you. Okay? That being said, the final piece of information here is the end result. Reagan entered the White House. The U.S. was the world's #1 creditor nation, meaning we're writing the checks. We're helping the other countries. 8 years after his final term, we had a $2 billion per year deficit because of this. Okay? Now, when we talk about foreign policy, though, we have some serious highlights under Reagan, and that's next chapter. But this is what he will exit domestically with. Okay? Almost an equally large trade deficit. So not only do we have economic problems domestically, but in the foreign sector here, we're not trading with other nations as we used to. So meaning we're not making a whole lot of money. Funds down. GNP down. Okay? When you have that, what happens when your GNP starts to fall? What increases? Two things increase when your GNP falls. Unemployment and inflation. Very good. Okay? This is problematic. Now, this is a success of Congress, though, and this is the big statistic I want you to have. In 1 year, they reduced the deficit by $60 billion. So now here's an example of history, because you all are familiar with the sequester most recently. If you're on the D.C. trip, you witnessed and felt the sequester as we looked at the White House and didn't go in. Okay? One question we have here, why can't Congress and the White House form an effective relationship to create something like that? We are now in the trillions of federal deficit. Why can't they work together, eliminate this partisan block, and reduce the deficit? What do you guys think?
Because the House is too divided, we have the Congress, the opposite party of the president, so we don't want to do anything that the president wants to.
To an extent, some people attribute the relationship not working because one is the House of Representatives, Republican, Senate Democrat, White House Democrat, so we're not going to have this effective working relationship just because of the lack of support in legislation. But another thing, too, where are the cuts going to come from?
Their salaries.
No, our salary.
But specifically, though, where would the government cut? Okay, look at a Democrat, for example. Where would the Democrats' demand cuts come from?
Richer people.
Okay, so tax cuts to the wealthy, that is one thing. Or so tax increases, excuse me, to the wealthy. But programs and stuff, where would they want cuts to come from?
Military.
Defense spending, very good. Where do the Republicans' demand cuts come from?
Big. No.
Welfare and social programs, absolutely. Okay. Look at and one of the major things people quoting Mitt Romney in the most recent election was where he, at some point, said something about Planned Parenthood. I'm going to cut that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was in that hidden where the person had the phone propped.
Yeah.
Okay. Instantly, Democrats and people who, regardless of political affiliation, who maybe have used that program before, they're like, oh, this isn't our guy. Okay? That's the problem. These cuts that we're seeking, $60 billion, okay, 1 year, that's a huge icon. Make sure you have that down. These cuts that we're seeking, the political parties disagree on where they're coming from, and as long as there's a disagreement, there's a block. Okay? Only when you have a majority in Congress, in both houses, as well as the White House, can you pass through legislation on an effective route, which is why President Obama had a lot of success in the first 2 years of his first term. And now we're looking at that stalemate across the lines here. That being said, this is what we have going on. We're going to watch this brief documentary, it's a newsreel, about 3 Mile Island 30 years later. While you're watching this, I want you guys to think about this. We're going to have a small discussion afterwards. Is nuclear power safe? Okay? This is what we have going on. Okay? Continue working on your outline sheet. The test is tomorrow. Now, if you have some of that done, as with the people in the other hour, I'll look at them now and make suggestions and comments. Like I said, test tomorrow. Pre-test will be on Thursday. You're also going to receive the VAT for Chapter 19, which will be due the 26th. 42 will be on the 25th. $8 per student. That includes your ticket and busing. Now, concessions are available. Okay, if you want that, great. That's on you. Or if you want to, we would save money in the long run if you just waited to eat after the film. We're going to park in front of Hobby Lobby just behind Culver's. You'll have an hour to eat again, maybe a little bit longer. Mrs. Gall and I will make that decision. And then there are a few options there for you to eat. Any questions?
When is the money due?
As soon as you can get it to me.
Okay.
Realistically, I'll have to have it by next Wednesday, the latest. Okay, and I do have permission slips that I'm going to pass out for you all to have your folks sign. That's a request by Mr. Wilson. Mr. Schlitt?
Are we going to be separate from the American history?
As far as whether we're separate or not,